Hello and welcome from the Magma Partners office in Santiago, Chile, to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where I have conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on those with some connection to Latin America. My guest today is John Boudeguer, the Chilean co-founder of Clay, an accounting and bookkeeping software in Chile. Sort of like a bench, but for Chile. John was one of the first people I met when I first came to Chile in 2010 because he was Start-Up Chile's first executive director. We cover what it was like starting Start-Up Chile all the way back then, his career as a software engineer before Start-Up Chile, and his move back into entrepreneurship after leaving the program. We talk about his role as the CEO of Cumplo, the largest peer-to-peer lending platform in Latin America, and why and how he started Clay, his newest startup, to help Latin American entrepreneurs better manage their business. John has an interesting mix of experiences in big companies, government, Start-Up Chile, and now his startups, and I really enjoyed getting to catch up with him on my trip to Chile. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hello, John. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
No, it's good to finally be able to do it. I think you're the last Start-Up Chile director that hasn't been on the podcast yet.
Wow.
So where are we in the world today?
We are in Santiago of Chile.
Awesome. And what are you working on today? What's your business?
Well, I'm working at a company called Clay. We basically created the accounting service that we all entrepreneurs want, combining the best of having an accounting team, but also with the technology behind. And so we're creating technology that automates a lot of stuff, and also technology that entrepreneurs and business owners really want to use.
So accounting is a problem in every country, and people that are listening from the US maybe won't understand the differences between accounting in the US and accounting in Chile, which is probably the best place to do accounting in Latin America. So what are some of the challenges of running a small business or a startup with accounting here?
Yeah. Well, I think Latin America has an excellent opportunity of doing like all the e-accounting because Chile is very advanced in paying taxes through the internet. The bank accounts are even though they're not the best technology ever, but they do have transfers are very fast. When we have electronic invoice as well. The difference between the US and Chile or Latin America in general is that there's the IRS of each country. They're the ones who create the invoice, or they store the invoices. So you have to go to only one place to see all the information. And this is very, very modern in Chile, but Colombia and Mexico are moving really, really fast. There's a whole finance kind of industry around all this ecosystem, and what we're trying to do is move forward the technology so that all the new entrepreneurs can understand and know better what the taxes that they are paying and how they can manage better their company without the hassle of putting all the numbers together.
Yeah, finance and accounting is one of the areas where Latin America is way ahead of the US. Like my taxes in Chile, I can do at the end of each month a couple minutes just to make sure that the information has been pulled in correctly. End of the year, maybe a half hour, double check everything's right, click submit, pay online. The US is horrible. It takes forever. And up until I think it was only like 4 years ago or 5 years ago, if you did an e-file for US taxes, they would print out into paper, and then somebody would manually re-enter your information into another system. So Chile's had that solved for at least the whole time I've been here.
Yeah, and the new thing that this government is doing is that they're putting a law saying that in the government there shouldn't be paper. All the invoices, there's no point of printing an electronic invoice. And there's another thing that if the government has a document that they file, they shouldn't ask it again. So that's going to be a really tough thing to do for governments, but they're really looking forward to that.
So basically, if the government has one of your documents somewhere, they should be able to look it up.
Exactly.
Rather than forcing you to go and print it out and get the stamps and
Exactly.
all that stuff.
Exactly.
That'd be amazing if that happens. So we'll jump into Clay and in the accounting industry in Latin America in a little bit. But I wanted to go and talk with you about your story. So where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Viña del Mar, which is a city an hour ago from Santiago, but I moved to Santiago when I was very young, at age 1 or 2.
I think a lot of the Chileans that have been on the podcast were born in another city and then came when they were in their between 1 and 5 years old.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
Well, Santiago concentrates a lot of the population of Chile, so people tend to come to the capital. And
did you know you were always going to be an entrepreneur from a young age, or is it something that came up in your career?
Well, my family everyone is an entrepreneur, but I did some corporate kind of works as well. I didn't have it in my mind actually, but when I started with Start-Up Chile, it was amazing. It just exploded my mind. We were bringing all these entrepreneurs, and I had the opportunity to be the first director. So we had to build so many things that they were not, there was nothing basically. So we were like an entrepreneur in residence or somehow, and we had a lot of fun creating stuff. And so when I jumped out of Startup Chile, there was of course the opportunity to start a company, and I took that opportunity.
And what did you do before Startup Chile? What were you working on?
Well, I'm an engineer. I love developing software. So I started my career at a local municipality. It's a municipality. It's like a local.
A part of the city.
Yeah. And so we created software there. We did like like the first CRM for the public sector, which is amazing because the handling data of the public sector is it's amazing the amount of data you have. So everything was very developed at a certain point, but we did like the next step of data in that municipality. Then I worked as a freelance developer I went to live in England for a year or so. I worked as a freelance developer, which is very well paid. I got paid like 4 times what I was being paid here in Chile, and I returned. I was living with the pounds, and I decided to go to like a real company, what I thought it was a real company at that time. I mean, every company is a real company, but I went to work for an airline company, like the biggest airline company here in Latin America. I did online marketing. I learned a lot about marketing and all the automation that can be done in marketing, and then I switched to Startup Chile. And the guy called me and said, "Hey, do you want to be part of the Ministry of Economy?" And I said, "Okay, yes." And a couple of weeks later, Startup Chile was born.
And what did your friends, family, people think about the jump from a great corporate job to going into the government?
Well, there's a lot of smart people in the government. It's an honor to work for your country. I mean, it's a different sense of responsibility. I mean, the incentives are completely different from the private and the public sector. The thing is that there's a lot of bureaucracy and you have to fight with a lot of stuff. But in the private sector, I mean, being an entrepreneur is always fighting against something that you don't like. So what we did in the government, I was very lucky because my boss just told me, move forward, I will close the gaps. And he basically did. We did a lot of things. We did Startup Chile in the innovation agency here. So they did things the old-fashioned way, and we started doing things in a very modern way. Of course, we probably broke some rules, but my boss was basically filling all those holes. And now this innovation agency is basically doing. They imported all these new practices into their daily activities. So we basically, with all this like a sense of entrepreneurship, or with the new way of looking at stuff, I mean, basically we did what they always wanted to do, but they didn't have. I'm not sure if it's the courage or you know the momentum or the energy to do it. We just came in, did the thing, and then they liked what they saw and they started doing it. I think that's what we put on top of the table for the public sector.
So when I first saw Start-Up Chile, it was startupchile.wordpress.com. There wasn't a custom domain. There was just a little blog, and there was maybe some photos, and I think a couple of people had come to Chile first, like 6 months before or 4 months before. What was that period like, and what was it like to design a program like this from scratch?
Well, we had to move forward, so we couldn't ask too many questions. Actually, I had a lot of other friends working in different areas of the government, and they were looking at us saying, "Hey, you cannot do that." Well, just did. So having a WordPress was completely out of what we could do, but we did it anyway. I mean, we're not breaking a huge law, but you know, bureaucracy works like that. So we had to move forward, and we had to break some eggs, and we started importing these entrepreneurs from all over the world. People said, you know, why aren't you doing this with Chileans? And we said, well, if we want to build like an international community, we cannot start building it from here. We had to import first and then start creating this international community. We had like the mission that we had is connect Chile to the world through people. So if we were connecting ourselves, we were not connecting to the world. So that's why, I mean, we just moved forward really, really fast. We were young and unafraid. And we didn't care much what people thought about us.
And what would you say was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome in the first, say, 6 months of the program? Or in our pilot round, or generation -1 that they say now?
No, I mean, I really respect those first batches of entrepreneurs because they've done amazing things. The most difficult stuff was actually giving the money or moving the money from the government to the entrepreneur. I had entrepreneurs saying, you know, coming to my office saying, hey, I don't even have money to pay the ticket of the bus. I had to come here walking. And I'm like, okay, if you don't have the money today in your bank account, I will transfer personally the money from my bank account. I said that a couple of times. And that made me, you know, move and go and knock all the doors and move forward. And basically I did a lot of pressure, and I'm not very well remembered in those offices. But, you know, we needed to move forward faster. And the government is not made to move fast. So that was tough. Yeah,
we were one of those companies that didn't get paid for a long time, where you said, hey, if it doesn't come by a certain date, I'll pay. We were lucky that we had private investment, and we were able to, you know, pay for the bus and the subway and stuff. But I remember it was, I think, like in the 4th month, we still hadn't gotten any reimbursement yet. And I think you said, like, on a Wednesday, if it's not here by Friday, I'll pay you. And it was there on Friday. So you somehow got it done.
Yeah, and well, at the beginning, the government, the mission of the government is do with the money what you said you were going to do, right? So if you said, I'm gonna dig this hole, and 1 meter aside there's another hole with gold, no, you cannot move 1 meter aside. You have to dig that hole, but it's useless. Okay, I don't care, because the money, everyone knows that the money, we gave you the money to dig that hole, so you cannot move 1 meter aside. So it's very difficult to move like that. And I think it's part of the government as well. It's everyone's money, and of course we have to take care about everyone's money. So you had to combine these two, like, realities and these two incentives, and it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing how quickly things changed, though. I mean, and like government scale and government pace, things changed instantly almost, even though it seemed like it took a while. I mean, I remember our first reimbursement, we were glue sticking 3 or 4 receipts into a specific color paper and a specific color page. And by the end, it wasn't like that anymore.
Yeah.
And now it's completely different.
Yeah, we didn't know many things. For example, entrepreneurs at the beginning had to reimburse everything. And you cannot buy, for example, things like alcohol. I mean, you're buying alcohol with public money. You cannot do that. So, and there's a guy who was reimbursing condoms and dog food, and we were like, what? Yeah, well, I have to live, no? Of course, the guy had to buy whatever he needs to buy. So then we decided to put a salary. Okay, you spend this amount of money in whatever you want. You don't have to reimburse everything. So we had. But the good thing about Start-Up Chile is that we had the opportunity to change within 3 months. Because every 3 months, there's a new batch of entrepreneurs coming. So the next contract was different from the one before, and we moved forward. I think that's why we moved forward very fast, because we could change things every 3 months.
So you reviewed probably thousands of applications for entrepreneurs over the time that you were the director. What were some of the things that you learned about which entrepreneurs would be successful and which wouldn't be?
Yeah. Well, that's a tough question. I don't have like the magic ball with, but there's a thing about commitment. People that want to be successful, they will be successful. If they will be successful with one thing or not, with one specific project or not, well, I'm not sure if the project is good. But at the beginning, we focused a lot on people. And you can see it. I mean, the energy or how committed they are to solve a problem. I mean, you can see that, and it was really fun. But also, there were a lot of people, that they came to Chile just because they wanted to have a long vacation, and they work not too much, and they party more than that what they work. And that those people, are not gonna be, or they could be, but probably they won't be as successful as we wanted to. So we focused a lot on the guys who wanted to be successful, and those guys we opened doors. I mean, this innovation agency has put money in probably 90% of the companies in Chile. So we thought that we deserved, these companies to answer our phone calls and open the doors for the entrepreneurs that we had in our company or in our network. So what we did, we basically did that. I mean, do you want a contact? Okay, which company do you want the contact with? Okay, I will call that guy immediately. And we opened a lot of doors. And the guy that saw the opportunity, he went straight to the opportunity. I mean, not saying, yes, maybe I call him tomorrow. No, the guys wanted, they had 6 months and they wanted to be successful. And those guys we would focus on. And then, the guy who wanted to party, there was not much that we could do about him or her.
And after you'd been the director for Start-Up Chile for a while, what made you decide that it was time to go and start a company?
Well, it was tough because I was having a great time. Actually, when you get to a point where I was no one, right? But suddenly, from one day to another, I was in the newspapers. People were, wanted to look at me and talk to me, and it was really amazing. But it was like a dream, right? Because you leave the position and you're no one again, right? And it's the public sector; it's not a company. So and there was a momentum, right? So basically, if I didn't go, the team was, it needed to flow up. Actually, after me came Horacio. Horacio did an excellent job, and then after him came Seba, and he did an excellent job. But if Horacio would stay, 10 years, things wouldn't go as fast as we wanted. So with a lot of pain, I said, okay, it's time for me. It was not the time for me, but I thought it was time for the program that someone else could continue. Actually, I moved to a startup. We were 4 guys in a table. No one, the phone didn't ring at all. And so we had to push and start all over again. Right? A year and a half later than we started Start-Up Chile. And for me, it was really tough in terms of emotionally, it was really tough. So starting a company is very emotional, and doing 2 companies in less than 2 years, it was very, very emotional.
So what was the company that you started after Start-Up Chile, and why did you decide to do that one?
Well, we were we did this with a guy called Nico Shea, and he left the government to create a company called Cumplo, which is a peer-to-peer lending company. And so when I decided to leave the program, he said, we've been working together. We work, very well together. So why don't you come and make the company with me? So the company had like 3 months when it started, and I joined the company, and we started working together. I mean, it was really fun as well. It was much slower to scale, because what we were doing was. It needed a lot of technology and not a lot of critical mass, and you cannot get to critical mass so fast. So I stayed there for around 4 years. I was the general manager, from being 4 in a table to when we had an office of about 60 people and trading millions of dollars each month. It was fun, but it is a completely different industry. I had to adapt every time.
So what were some of the things you learned going from the government sector to doing fintech?
Well, fintech is very regulatory. So even though you have a passion for technology, you still have to look into lawyers and laws and stuff like that. And we had a lot of problems because what we wanted to do, it was not specifically written in the law. So what we had to do an interpretation of it, and we had some problems. Actually, we were published in The Economist, like shut down Cumplo, because people. The banks filed a legal kind of thing to the regulator, and the regulator said, "Okay, stop until we understand what you guys are doing, and then you can move forward." And we said, "No, because if we stop, you will never make that the next step." So we had to fight, like not the fight, but we had the media fight and then the legal fight and all that stuff. And 5 years later, the thing just disappeared. But we had to go through all that from the beginning. So the difference between being in the public and the private, and specifically, it's very regulatory. So you have to spend a lot of time reading contracts and stuff. But it's fun because it's the impact at the end what it matters. It's the volume, it's the amount of people that you're touching, and that I think it's amazing. Cumplo today is trading around $15 million each month in peer-to-peer loans, which makes it like the biggest by far in terms of amount of money traded of Latin America. And it just scaled to Mexico, and it's moving forward.
And why is peer-to-peer lending important in the financial systems in a country like Chile or in Mexico?
Well, that's a very good question, because access to capital is tough everywhere, right? But specifically in Latin America, you have very big competitors. Few and big competitors. Like there's 3 banks in Colombia, there's 3 banks in Chile, and there's 3 families. Those banks belong to 3 families. So basically they set the rules. And when you kind of not be, when you can be free of those actors, it's a game changer. Because money is not coming from the banks, but it's coming from other peers like you. So this disintermediation of the banking system, that was something that really pushed us forward. And we had this thing saying like Cumplo is creating a financial network that makes a better society, like a more fair society. Because fairness is not decided by us, it's decided by the peers. And that is really motivating, or was really motivating for us.
And how did you decide to launch Clay?
Yeah. Well, I was being the general manager of a company is being a little bit on this and a little bit on that. I wanted to go deeper on technology. I thought that the technology was moving fast, and there's a lot of things that can be done. And what we were seeing at Cumplo is that the analysis of companies is not that technological. Data is not moving from one company to the other the way as we thought it should be, and this risk analysis was really bad. So I thought I could give give a try a company that could solve the problem of managing your company like without the hustle of today. Today everything is very manual, and even though everything is electronic, people tend to print all the electronic stuff and then move it to a different software. So we thought, there's a lot of automation that can be done. So we started creating prototypes, having our first clients, and then we decided, the companies don't need a software, they need a service. So we decided to put this software that we had with an accounting service, and that's what we're offering right now. The whole service of accounting powered by this automation technology that we built and the accounting systems that we built.
So for US audience, it's probably most similar to Bench in the US, where you basically are able to have a dedicated accountant that will actually help you do this stuff that you need to do, but with automation on top of it. Exactly.
Well, and as I was saying before, that the good thing about Latin America is that you have the invoice, and it's a very well it's an XML. It's a standard, and so who's issuing the invoice and who's receiving the invoice and the amount and what part is tax and what part is not tax and all that stuff. It's very structured. So what we built is not only technology that automates the importation of the import of data, but also we basically move the productivity of an accountant by we multiplied by 5. I mean, the guy could do 1 and now he can do 5 with the technology that we've done, the creation of accounting entries, but automatically, because we have the context. We don't need a guy yet pushing a button. So now we're doing like 20% of those accounting entries automatically, and we want to move forward to do probably 50 or 60%, and then always have a person looking at the numbers, but very supported by technology.
So do traditional accountants view this as something that will help their business, or do they view it as a threat?
Well, you want the nice answer or the... I don't really care. Because I've been trying to convince accountants, and if you... this is very Steve Jobs kind of saying, but if you ask accountants where the future is, they wouldn't know, right? So they're doing things manually, and they kind of like that. So that's why we created the service, because we want to train our accountants not in accounting, but in the technology that we're doing, and making a better life for the accountants that see and use Clay. The other ones, what can I do with them, right?
Yeah, accountants are probably very tough to sell to. I mean, with the business Jesse and I came to Start-Up Chile with, it was selling to lawyers at the beginning. It's tough. Accountants, lawyers, and probably like restaurants are probably some of the 3 hardest people to sell to. So how many people are at Clay today?
We have 10. We're 10. We have like 120 clients so far, and we want to scale. We're looking for the money to scale, and still the good thing about our business is that we have revenue, right? So we move forward with revenue, which is something. It's a combination of the real world and the electronic world, right? So because we have technology, but what the feeling that our companies have is something real. I mean, tax are being paid, and people are getting paid with the payroll numbers done okay and stuff like that. So we want to scale. We want to have at least 500 companies by the end of probably next year.
And talking about scalability, how does the tax and accounting system work in other Latin American countries? Is this something you can do outside of Chile too?
Well, we want to focus in Chile, in Colombia, and in Mexico. Chile has 5 million taxpayers, like company taxpayers, and then Colombia has 15, and Mexico has 55. I know that they like the local IRS in Chile. Of course, you can do that. In Colombia and Mexico, they're moving forward really fast, so you can do this like e-payment of taxes. Probably Colombia is 5 years back on regulation, but it's not real 5 years because they just can jump from year 1 to year 5. They don't have to wait 5 years. Chile just completed like the 100% of electronic invoices last year, and Colombia and Mexico are moving really, really fast. So that's why we want to replicate this in these countries.
And where do you see the biggest growth in types of businesses that might want to use this? Is it something for small businesses? Is it big companies, medium? What are you seeing?
Even though, because our key feature is bank reconciliation. We connect banks and invoice systems, and we provide a tool for our customers to do the cross of this information. This is done everywhere in Latin America, in big, huge and small companies, manually. So we've sold some of these solutions to big companies, only the reconciliation kind of thing. But what we see the opportunity in like expanding in hundreds of companies. Actually, moving a company from Chile to Colombia should be super simple. With the same like accounting team, you can basically have the same platform in this country. So my dream is to contribute with the path of growing. I mean, if you create a company in Chile, it's obvious that you have to go to Colombia and Mexico because it's super simple in terms of administration. And you can look at your company in an overall report and saying, okay, I don't have to have different systems and stuff like that. Using banks and using this like electronic invoices as a base.
And do you have any books, blogs, podcasts, documentaries that you like to recommend to people?
I do have. I'm not sure about it. I use there's a partner of you in the batch, Amir, the guy from Todoist. I love reading those posts. He's a very he writes about remote work, and I really enjoy knowing how companies can deploy this remote work, because the fight for talent today is worldwide, and I think it's super tough looking at the world as a world. I mean, as an overall, all the different time zones and different currencies and different, for example, how you set vacations in a company where you have 70 countries. But for me, it's like magic, and I think the future might be somehow. At that point. So I really enjoy his tweets, and everything that he recommends, I probably click it.
Yeah, we'll put a link to the podcast with Amir and also his Twitter in the show notes. So if you could go back to when you were just leaving Start-Up Chile, knowing what you know today, what advice would you give yourself?
Wow. Well, one of the things that I've done after Start-Up Chile is having a family. I was married at that time, but I had my first son right after I quit Start-Up Chile and started this other company, and now I have 4. So, and I have twins less than a year. So it's basically building clay and having twins. I think having a family is probably one of the most amazing things that you can have. I mean, it's a very personal feeling. I'm not pushing people to have kids or anything, but for me, I mean, it's very it's great, and and doing this like a mix of building a company and having kids, it's very, very, very tough. So I've been very concentrated the last years, not doing like things like too many things. I'm focusing in these 2 things: building the company and having a family. And sometimes you get too like into yourself. Like probably what I've missed is creating more networks or being with more people. Because it's tough. I mean, you don't have time, and when you have time, you have to, I mean, you don't even have time to rest, right? So if you have an hour to sleep, you just sleep it. You don't look at Twitter and stuff like that, right? You just sleep. So if I would give me an advice, I'd say, don't go into yourself so much. Probably I should talk to more people and have this conversation more often, I think.
And what's next for you and for Clay over the next, say, year or 2 years?
Well, we have the challenge of scaling and moving to another country. I think I would love to go to Colombia and Mexico. I think it's an amazing opportunity for Clay, but for the company, for our clients. I mean, we have clients from Colombia that they have companies in Chile, so they do all the accounting thing in Chile with us. But it would be amazing to have the same system for different countries. I mean, we're separated by currencies, but what I've seen in entrepreneurs all around Latin America is that they want to move forward faster, and that means that they need to manage their numbers in a very well structured way as well. So that motivates me a lot in the next year and a half.
Well, it's going to be fun to see you and the team build it. So
right. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. It was really fun.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to my podcast with John Boudeguer. If you want to hear more about the inside story of Startup Chile, listen to my episode with Nico Shea, its founder, Sebastián Vidal, Horacio Melo, and Rocio Fonseca, Startup Chile directors that have now moved on and started new things after John. If you enjoyed our conversation, please share it with a friend or on social media, as it's the best way for others to hear about the podcast and learn about interesting Latin American stories. You can also be like Matt1585, who wrote us a rating on iTunes that said, "Great podcast. Thanks, Nathan." Thanks for listening, Matt. We always appreciate a rating or a comment, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Angel and Sofia for their help producing this podcast, and thanks again for you for listening. Hope you have a great rest of your day.